Welcome, Josh Silverman, local real estate agent to Berkeley, California, not so far away from where I reside in San Mateo. I can share how I came across you, Josh, but maybe for our audience members who are curious about who you are and what it is that you do professionally, what you like about your neighborhood, how you ended up in Berkeley. Can you share a bit? I know that's a lot of questions all at once.
Absolutely happy to talk about those things. So yeah, I'm a native of Berkeley. I was born here. Left during my 20s, explored the world a bit, and came back, settled down, have my family here. And I was working in San Francisco for about 10 years in real estate prior to kind of coming back here completely work-wise and living. And joined a local firm here, Kai Real Estate. That has been terrific for me. I work closely with a team here, and we all kind of collaborate and do interesting stuff. And I got into real estate. I got the itch when I bought a triplex, the first property I bought with a good friend of mine, and got into kind of rental housing and really interested in investing, and then just seeing this whole world open up around multifamily and what it can do for both the individual and for cities, right? To help keep people in cities. So I've just kind of been on that track. I've been a developer and investor myself, and then a real estate agent representing buyers and sellers. For sure.
Makes a ton of sense. So, little known fact about myself is I'm also a Bay Area native from Orinda, and lived in Berkeley for 3.5 years as a renter.
Great.
And that was actually my first brush with local politics, as I was walking around my neighborhood and got encountered by a then running for council member, Ben, I forget his last name. But he prevailed in his race to represent South Berkeley.
Okay.
And I remember I had a conversation with him, and I said, he was like, "What do you care about?" And I said, "Well, I'm renting, and rent's really high. So, if you could get some more housing built, that would be really great." And he low-key laughed in my face.
Really?
He was like, "Yeah, state law, not going to happen this year. Good luck with yourself."
Wow.
I've never had that type of political interaction with a candidate or elected since.
That's wild. Yeah, and that's been the kind of what's happened in Berkeley in many ways, right? It's been very kind of NIMBY oriented and I wouldn't say anti-growth, but like effectively kind of like just not policies not encouraging development and densification or any of that. Yeah, so. It's an interesting time now because people don't say that now. You won't hear council people talking like that right now. So it's exciting.
It is exciting. We've got to import that over to the peninsula. Working on it over here. Okay. But I really appreciated the video you have on your own YouTube channel, which folks should go check out. Talking with the folks from the Incremental Developer Alliance. And yes. Just before hopping on this call, we were discussing how you attended their workshop that Alameda County sponsored. And I think for a show about being, a pro-social neighbor, hearing and understanding how housing gets created and who can end up physically, financially, socially living in your community is really important to understand. So I was wondering if you could share for our audience what attracted you to attend the Incremental Developers Alliance workshop and some of the things you learned.
Yeah, so I was referred to them from a developer colleague of mine and invited to the workshop. And what was so interesting and so exciting for me was it was a organization dedicated to small developers like myself who are they talk about the missing middle in the Incremental Development Alliance. So it's a national nonprofit servicing all 50 states and encouraging building in this missing middle. And what's the missing middle? It's 0 units to, I think they say 20 units. And so the 0 units being like a food truck potentially, and that's not exactly housing, but it's kind of a way to build community. And I thought that was just amazing that there was this organization to help build out this missing middle, because you have these like huge corporate developers that want to do, you know, 10 floor skyrise, you know, condo buildings or apartment buildings. And then you have a lot of like single family homes, you know, as far as just building out single family homes that are large, maybe 2,000 square feet or more. And so, and then there's just this whole kind of middle area that hasn't been, you know, serviced or given enough attention, or you know, they're really thinking about like focusing on the ecosystem of like, how do you build that missing middle, how do you have, and what makes it most effective. And they really have narrowed down on local developers who live in the community, who can build in these spaces, is the most effective thing, and it's what the people of that community want, right? So not that they have anything against like corporate landlords and these big sky rises, because that plays a role too, but there's something very special about being a member of your community and building there and really loving, you know, the area, your neighbors. And it's something that's happened in my life, in the buildings that I'm involved in, that I've owned and built. And so so it's just like, oh wow, there's somebody talking about what I'm experiencing, and then how to kind of systematize it and think about it, and then how to get government involved, how to think about financing, how to think about permitting, and you know, I do a lot of work in LLCs and co-ownership and how you get that going, and insurance companies, and there is this ecosystem. And so like, so when they were just talking about things, I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. This is like stuff that I'm kind of doing and thought about, but I never thought about an organization being kind of dedicated to it. So it was really fun. It was really cool. So I did a all day workshop with them, and yeah, and they're essentially trying to train people to do this, is kind of their mission, right? So to go out there and build a fourplex, right? Find a lot, maybe small houses that you can sell individually, maybe it's rental. So they're kind of pro both. On my channel, I talk about creative real estate ownership. So I do focus a lot on kind of owning real estate, but I'm also a rental. I'm also a landlord, so I own rental housing too. So there's room for both, and there's needs for both, right? But yeah, so yeah, it's great. It's a great organization.
How would you describe sort of the range of demographics of folks who attended the workshop? Would you place yourself towards the side of the spectrum of having more experience and having an easier time understanding what they were trying to educate about? Were there folks that seemed to be in the wrong room or being left out of the educational process?
I thought, you know, it was great because there's like architects, there was like city planning people there. There was a lender there, and there was definitely a lot of like smaller you know, kind of new rookie developers, and so there's a lot of folks who maybe just wanted to build an ADU in their backyard, and that was the first thing they wanted to do. So I'd say I was a little further along in the process, and my project was bigger than the normal thing that folks were building. And yeah, so there's a lot of like educating first time people, like, so people maybe had a little, maybe they inherited like a lot. There was like a couple people at my table that inherited a piece of land, and they're like, well, what should I do with it? So they were in the right room at that point. And so I was like, I know what to do with, I know what to do with that land, right? But yeah, it was definitely on the newer side, but it was great because it was just really like, you know, there's a lot of talk about the financing, how do the numbers work, and there's a big focus was like, it has to be profitable for this to make sense, right? You have to, housing has to be built, and it has to make money in order to be sustainable, right? So there's just a lot of like, yes, we all want to build housing, but how to make it all pencil for me is extraordinarily difficult, especially in the Bay Area, right? So they definitely, there was some education around that and how to like assess a project to make sure it's profitable. And it's So yeah, it was geared more towards new folks, but I still took away a lot from it.
Yeah, in watching your follow-up call with the Incremental Developer Alliance folks, I could pick up what you're putting down with respect to them having a mission that spans an extremely diverse set of communities around the United States, and maybe bringing the show to the San Francisco Bay Area, where costs of construction are so much higher than other places they go to,
Yes,
makes it harder to take away some of the optimism that they're selling. And
absolutely.
I'm curious, for folks who are wondering the state of things in the San Francisco area today, where costs per square foot can get up to $1,000 or something.
Sure.
What are some of the smaller? Basically, their advice, as I understood it, was scale back. Like, make sure the math works.
Yes,
Make sure you're trying for the right scale of project is basically the impression of what they seem to be
yes.
adapting their pitch to a higher cost area. What are some of the takeaways that you drew from what seems like a mission that is brought to places where the costs are maybe $100 to $200 per square foot to do construction?
Totally. Yeah. And that's absolutely the biggest challenge. And so I'm constantly looking at projects and I'm like, they don't pencil, right? I mean, the cost of the land and then the cost of construction here are really high. So like most of the deals, yeah, they don't pencil. I think one thing that I took away that was really interesting was they were saying like the trend now is less, the size of the family, the size of each, unit, number of people living in each unit has gone down over the years, right? And so the percentage of people who are single who are buying homes it was quite high. I can't remember what the percentage was. It was like 30 or 40%. It was a big number, right? And so 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, we were building these bigger houses. We were experiencing a lot of urban sprawl in order to accommodate the desire for these larger houses, while at the same time, the average number of people per unit was going down. And so we didn't have, we have these really big houses, and this happens in Berkeley. We have these really big houses on the hill. And yes, they're wonderful, beautiful houses. You put a family in them and they have a great time, and that's awesome. But there's so many people who, maybe are single or just a couple and don't need all that space and want to be here, right? And so in particular, so my wife's a teacher in Berkeley. And, so I think a lot about the economics around like teacher salaries and the ability to afford housing here. And so what they were talking about was like build more housing, smaller housing, build think about densification. So taking, urban infill projects where you have like these lots that are underutilized, build them out, but maybe you have like 4 small houses on a lot. And that's much better than one large house that, you might have 3 or 4 people in, and then you have 4 small houses, you have 8 people, and maybe those are more affordable, right? For the entry point for all those. And so I got excited with that of like, yeah, this is kind of where we're at. And then, yeah, you can treat them as starter homes too, and once you grow out of them, because sometimes, yeah, you will grow out of space, but you've enjoyed it for that period of time and you pass it on to the next generation, and they can do the same thing and move on. And, if they want to expand and have a bigger family, that's great too. But so this focus on, I love tiny homes. I love ADUs. I love this concept, but like even taking it further, like small home building is a really interesting way to combat the affordability crisis and utilize these spaces a little more, maximize them. I think is kind of the idea. We need to have folks closer to the jobs. We don't want people commuting an hour and a half every day to come into the city. So I really like that idea. of like, yeah, that trend seems to be like, let's shift that and not be so concerned about having so much space necessarily, in both in a house and on a lot. Not that that's not a good thing also, but also really focusing on accommodating what the need is, right? Building to the need, was I thought was great. Um, yeah.
Was the, I guess you've worked in Berkeley and San Francisco, which are, I would say, objectively really on the red tape side of the spectrum when it comes to land use and
Yeah.
land use change, and holding prohibitions on what you can do with your land. And was there anything that kind of shocked incremental developer alliance folks when trying to clarify what the constraints
Yeah.
are local to this region?
Yeah. And I mean, I think they're aware of some of like the NIMBYism stuff and a lot of the restrictions and red tape, and it's true. Um, and some people raise their hand. They're like, well, how do you address these things? How do you kind of get in? And they're like, you need to infiltrate your government. And I thought infiltrate was pretty interesting. It had this kind of like negative, like spy, like, connotation to it, but that's not what they were saying. They were like, they need to hear about choke points, right? The people running government, they need to understand that, there are these massive choke points that can be really problematic, and we're dealing with small profit margins oftentimes, especially those of us who aren't trying to build luxury housing, right? Our profit margins are thinner. And so they were just like, you need to get in government and infiltrate and be involved in it. And I was like, that's nice to say, and it is, and it's true, but it's like, it's hard to wear that hat while wearing the developer hat and going out and, you know, working with investors, and then working with, find sourcing. I mean, there's so many jobs, right? How much time do we have to kind of infiltrate government? So they were definitely aware of some of the problems here. And But what I've been encouraged by is what's happening in terms of some of those restrictions being loosened, right? And a lot of these assembly bills and different things. There's a very pro housing agenda coming out of the state right now, right? And so it's been interesting that it's finally being addressed. A lot of the fruits of the labor of many people fighting to saying, what are we doing here? Why can't we build a fourplex on this piece of land? Like, why is this so hard, right? And states like Texas are eating our lunch, right? They're just able to build faster and more efficiently and cheaper, and we're just like, what are we doing here? People are leaving, right? Too expensive. You don't have inventory. You don't have enough inventory, so it's driving up prices, right? So I right now is just I thought that was, their focus wasn't on the political change of California, because they were like, we're a national organization, but the connection for me was very ripe. It was very much in my face, and I was like, this is an interesting time.
Totally. And I can totally appreciate how being told you need to become a political lobbyist in addition to everything else we're telling you to go do is just asking a lot.
That's a lot, right? So that's yeah. So when she said that, it was such a relief, because I'm thinking about like Scott Wiener and some people, and Buffy Wicks, and there's some people, and Governor Newsom for that matter. I mean, there's this like, and when Kamala Harris was running, there's this real, she's from California, and she was really talking about this abundance agenda and really like getting in and building. And so thank goodness, because I don't know if I have the bandwidth to necessarily go fight that fight. I'm certainly going to be attending city council meetings and that, and having my say. But yeah, that's a full-time job in and of itself. I mean, in and of itself, changing laws, right? That's tough.
Yeah, it does happen so close to home though. And I think for audience members who've never participated in local government, land use is maybe the most interesting. I mean, it's not hard to locate on your city website the web page they'll usually have about upcoming projects.
Yeah.
And they'll often have a map. So if you want to, you can go locate yourself on a map and
Yeah.
see what applications are in the pipeline, what construction projects are going on. So I think if people are wanting to dip their toes into local politics and understanding what's happening around them, it's very doable.
Yeah.
On the other hand, in San Mateo, where I reside, about 50% of residents own their homes,
Mm-hmm.
50% rent. And I
Okay.
think that holds true about statewide for California. I'm not sure about nationally,
Yeah.
but given that less than half of the population is in the rental market and really attuned to the dynamics there, and
Right.
even a much smaller percentage of your community are landlords. And so you got into it very early with a friend buying into this triplex you
Yeah.
described. For people who've never been a landlord before, most all people have been renters.
Yeah.
What's the experience like? Because I think a lot of people have this image, having been on the other side of the bargain, of, well, it's, security deposit and the fight over the security deposit, payment and late payments, repairs, timeliness of repairs, like, but they don't maybe see the full range of services that a landlord is held to account for or not held to account for. So can you catch up our audience members who've never been a landlord? That's probably most of them.
Yeah.
What are some of the day in the life things
Yeah.
that people should know?
Yeah. I mean, I my evolution as a landlord, I mean, I went into it not really understanding exactly the responsibility of it, right? You can buy a property and be a landlord with no license, no certification. You don't have to take a class. You buy a property and all of a sudden you need to know what's required of you and how to provide safe and habitable housing at all times, right? So in many ways, I learned on the job, and what I learned was, I really enjoy it. Um, I I certainly went into it thinking some of those like negative stereotypes as well, like landlord only shows up when they need money, when they need rent, the rent's due, and people not maintaining their building, calling over and over, I have a leaky faucet, and they don't come out. And those things are true. I mean, I've experienced them, and what I what I learned very early on was, I mean, it's service. It's a service industry, and so you're providing housing in exchange for money. You're providing housing that's functional, that's well lit, that's safe, that's habitable in exchange for a payment, right? And so this, especially in Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, where you have these high kind of rent control regulations, there's a lot of adversarial kind of um, relations between tenants and landlords, where each are trying to kind of game the system in some ways and some more than others, right? And I went into it thinking, I was like, you know what? I don't want that adversarial relationship with my tenants. I really want this to be a win-win, right? And I started thinking about it like a restaurant, right? If you go in and you give somebody a great meal at a great price and it's hot and it's on time and then the check comes and they're happy to pay the bill, right? You're not gonna you avoid, amazingly, you avoid the fight, right? And so like I would have tenants sometimes who would really kind of push me. I'd say, hey, can you there's a bed bug incident, and I was like, well, you brought the bed bugs in, and and you need to take care of that. And she was like, no, the law is actually like, it doesn't matter where they came from, you need to take care of that. And so it was like very much like very quick to like be like, no, here's the law, here's what's in. What was logical in my mind was like, no, I think you brought them in, so you could, but so there's often these points of like you have these potential for conflict, and follow the law, take care of the people, right? Take care of your tenants. You want them to be happy. You want them to be in your unit thriving. You want them to be there, um, having great lives. And on top of that, what's really cool is you build relationships with them over time. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. And that's what I kind of like the Incremental Development Alliance stuff when they're talking about being a member of the community in which you own real estate, that if you're there and you live half a mile away, their issues are your issues, right? And it's not so much like, oh, the landlord's coming over. Like, people kind of don't care after a certain while, right? They're like, can you take care of this and this? And I'm like, yes. And I'll do it fast. And then it's back to like talking about life, right? And then on top of that, if you establish a good relationship with your tenants, like there's going to be times where you need them. And like if there's a repair, like let's say you're out of town and there's a massive leak somewhere, and you're like, can you call the plumber and you arrange that? I'm out of town, I can't do that. And like, can you see it? Can you pay them on the spot? And I'll promise to pay you back, or whatever it is. Once you have that relationship, they'll do that for you, right? And they're like, I got it. Yeah, no problem. And then you just you Venmo them when you get back. And so it's back to that kind of that sense of service, right? It's if you just approach it as like, yeah, and they need to take care of the property too, right? They're not busting windows and being crazy and like loud parties and like doing stuff that's they're holding up their end of the bargain too, right? It can be really fun. It can be really cool. So yeah, the horror stories that I've heard, and I hear them all the time. I haven't experienced it, right? So I just, it's really just about like every day establishing trust, being, responsive. Everybody just needs to be heard, right? And like when you're a tenant too, it's just like you just don't know how to solve something, right? It's not even that like you're helpless. It's just like you're the professional. This is your building. You know how it works. Deal with it, and then that relief that folks feel by being taken care of, like it really does pay dividends. And less turnover. Turnover is not good for me. I want people to stay. It's expensive to you paint the unit, you redo the floors, you replace some things. You have downtime, 2 months down. Mortgages still do, right? So I want people to be happy and stay, and and I think it's been successful in that way, and it's just people. At the end of the day, right? It's just people. Take care of people, they'll take care of you.
So some of your clients as a real estate agent are perhaps buying into properties that they are going to be renting out, and I imagine for the first time sometimes. Where do you see the biggest disconnect between their expectations of landlording and the realities of it? And how do you kind of prepare folks for it?
When they're renting out a unit for the first time, like if they're moving out of their condo or something and they rented a condo.
Exactly.
I think the sense of you need to handle this right now, right? The immediacy of getting calls, and I think so. The one big thing I think, so a lot of people call real estate investing a passive investment, right? You've heard like it's a passive investment, meaning you're not working every day at it, right? So there's like a passive quality to building, to earning income in real estate. And in my experience, so I think sometimes people go into it thinking, well, this is kind of passive, right? They're just living there, they're sending me rent, I pay the mortgage, everything's good. And then the reality is like, you really do need to like show up at your building. You need to be responsive. You need to handle things. You need to like have a good accounting system. You need to like keep track of, are you making money or not? Where are you getting hurt on maintenance? When a maintenance problem comes up, you may need to get 3 bids, right? And so I think the biggest shock is like how kind of not passive it is, how active it is. And then there's that thing of people's lives are not, they're not in your hands, but they're in your space. Like, you're not responsible for their lives, but they're in a space that you're responsible for, right? And so I think there's a bit of a, you know, again, like, so you can invest in a REIT, right? And a national REIT, and just throw your money in, and you'll never think about it. You'll never hear about anything. But this is definitely a little bit more personal and a little bit more hands-on. And I think that can be one of the shocks. It's like, oh, I got a call on Christmas Eve, and I had to deal with that. And I've gotten those calls before, and they're not so fun. But so I think that's, some people are like, man, I just absolutely don't want that call. Okay, this might not be the right thing for you, but or if you can afford it, property manager helps those things too. If you have a good enough margin, that's one way to do it. But I like to manage my properties because I enjoy it, and also I nobody's going to care more for my building than I am. Right, is the kind of the way I feel, and there's some great property managers out there. I work with them. I've hired them, but I do like seeing, like, I'm like, oh, I don't like how that, that protection on that door outside is peeling off. That's definitely going to like cause some rot unless I address that soon. It allows me to kind of jump in and do that. And so that preventative maintenance stuff, it adds up over time when you're kind of paying attention. So it's more active than passive, I think, is the shock.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I want to refocus on Berkeley, and
Yeah.
I mean, you grew up there, so maybe it was less of a choice to stay there. But what attracts you about Berkeley? What keeps you there?
Oh, Berkeley's I love Berkeley. Growing up here was just a great place to grow up. I mean, it's a beautiful city, filled with smart, interesting people. It's a progressive place, so I think it's, there's benefits and downsides to that for sure, in terms of the politics. But an interesting place, I'd say, to grow up. Yeah, the friends I made are still my closest friends to this day. And so there's just something special about the culture, and about kind of, it's something in the water. The humans that it's breeding are just good people in my experience in many ways. And so I left, and I didn't find it a very interesting place once I hit about 20. And I went to school in LA, but I did leave because there's a sleepy quality to Berkeley also. It's not a big city. And I felt like it was like, it's just like a little too slow and family oriented when I was in my 20s and early 30s. And so I left. And then, but then once I decided to settle down, I did come back, and having kids here is just been kind of wonderful. So I have a 6 and a 7-year-old, and so 2 boys. And it's a fun, they're doing stuff that I did as a kid, but even like more, and it's more kind of fun sports leagues and fun, Tilden Park, you go hiking, and it's just a cool kind of great place to be. And it's more of a day town. It's not a very happening like night place, but like I'm tired at night, so I go to bed relatively early. It's all good. I don't mind that. So at this point in my life, it's great, and I feel good about it. But I love the whole Bay Area too. I'd have a good life in El Cerrito or Albany too, and or Oakland. So. But yeah, and then right now, I also think it's an interesting time, especially in real estate, because it's become more pro housing, and so I think there's changes happening. I think there's so much in Berkeley when I grew up. It was just like, this is such a special place. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. It's perfect as it is. Anybody who wants to touch it is like opportunistic, greedy, and that feeling is slowly changing. It still exists here for sure, but it's slowly changing to say, no, we need to change. There needs to be more inclusiveness. There needs to be more middle housing again, like more opportunities for people with less money to kind of come in and participate and add to the culture, right? And so I'm happy that those changes are happening now, because I actually do think it makes it a more dynamic environment, a more interesting place to be, for sure. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, no, I am a big fan of Berkeley. I had a travel to Texas a few months ago, and I think contrasting the explosive real estate development happening there, just visibly, you can see how rapidly new housing constructions occurring and folks moving into it, and moving out of California is a jarring contrast from seeing this 50 plus year political belief system held by the dominating political decision-making apparatus of Berkeley.
Yes.
They're not wrong. Berkeley is very special, and there's plenty to fight to protect, but the exclusionary effect of this mentality is really toxic, and ultimately, California is going to be losing seats in the House of Representatives in the coming years, become a less of a political powerhouse in the long run, perhaps, barring population growth rate turning around in the way it's happening in other states in the country.
Absolutely.
One other aspect that I think visibly brings this home, and I know there's a lot of town and gown conflicts between the UC Berkeley system and the city, which are different governing bodies, physically next to each other, is that the UC Berkeley system will admit students, and they might or might not be allowed to build housing for those students, and the net effect of not building housing is student homelessness. And it's not tremendously visible, but the statistics about it, not just in UC Berkeley, but across the universities of California and across the Cal States, are that student homelessness is really high.
Wow.
And so students who are homeless aren't necessarily showing up at City of Berkeley council meetings about zoning discussions, but the net effects of the last 50 years are not necessarily positive, and it's been hard to reframe the effects of change. And I know that very well in San Mateo, where I reside. There's a real tension between can change be good?
Right. Yes. 100%. I mean, I think that's a central tension of what's happening right now. It's just like, can you, some of the older folks, the boomers and beyond, right? They've, in many ways, I love my boomers, but in many ways they've had a really good kind of run. And I don't think made room for enough of the next generation to kind of get a foothold into cities like Berkeley and start a life, right? And not out of kind of indirectly, right? And this is not a story of like, hero and villain in my mind. And I remember my stepmom and my father being at one point being like, building at the North Berkeley BART station, right? So that became like, wow, that's horrible. What's going to happen to the community? What's going to happen to parking and traffic and subtle stuff about who's coming in, right? And that stuff is always underneath the surface, right? And I just remember being like, oh, it's really interesting. Like, there's a disconnect here in terms of kind of like having a place that's available and accessible for all income levels and opportunities for everybody to kind of get a piece of our place in our culture and simultaneously be like, no, this is gonna affect our lifestyles considerably. And again, yes, some of those things, concerns are real or whatever, right? It's not like I do get it. It's not one or the other. It's not black and white. Um, but I mean, having experienced in my own house, and these are wonderful people, who are well intentioned and fighting the good fight in many ways and in their fields, um, had a real kind of blind spot around this. And it's been difficult, right? To open to expand those horizons, right? To see these as a potentially a net positive. We can do this collectively in a way that works for everybody, a real positive, right? And yeah, you don't want these towns to turn into museums. That's not what this is about, right? This is about having more people have access to these places, right? And then having them thrive, right? I mean, they need customers. These restaurants need customers and people, and right, it's a whole kind of thing. But yeah, so um, there's language now around it, around pro growth. That's not um, tied to corporate greed, right? That's not just tied directly to, well, you just want to make a lot of money. The word developer, right, has been, I grew up kind of thinking, oh, developer is like, oh, dark, dark, shadowy rooms and, making just gazillion dollars. It's like, so even that word, right, is like, hey, that these aren't all bad people, right? Not even by a long shot, right? So there are some bad people in there, absolutely. But it's so interesting to see kind of words and language and kind of a vibe shift happening around this stuff. It's fun right now.
Totally. Yeah, housing provider might be a better
Yeah, housing provider.
phrase.
Yeah, sure, exactly. And that's what I felt like I did on my project. When I turned 6 to 12 units, it was just like housing provider. And these are people, and I know my tenants. I know they're local educators and they're local, they do all kinds of jobs, right? They're nurse and property manager and, nice housing, right? And they necessarily, um, may not have, not them specifically, but maybe that group of people collectively couldn't have been in the city without those houses, right? And so, yeah, housing provider is a great term for it.
What is maybe one thing about your neighborhood that you think could be improved, or one way in which it could be improved? This is something I've been asking every guest, and
Yeah,
I've always gotten an answer, but some more emphatic, some maybe less enthusiastic. But anywhere can be improved. So I'm curious if there's even a small improvement that you can think of that would meaningfully improve things for you.
for me personally, or just kind of for the whole, um, about my neighborhood that would improve things. I'm a little weird in that I would like to see a greater diversity of income levels in my neighborhood. I think, when thinking about housing and thinking about um, the place, the gatekeeping kind of stuff of affordability in my neighborhood. I live in North Berkeley, and it's very expensive to get into here. And I would love to see along like Solano Avenue, which is a commercial district in the neighborhood, more mixed use buildings. So you would have, a lot of retail space and then multi-unit above. And I'd love to see those buildings kind of rise up. Um, that would be pretty cool because I think it would just like counterbalance. Not that there's, again, nothing wrong with who's here now and in this community, but it would provide a nice energy. And I think people resist change, and change is really scary. And I think it would kind of open some things up in some ways, culturally, spiritually, maybe. And I think that'd be pretty interesting. I'd love to see that happen.
Awesome. Well, let's make it happen.
Yeah.
I'm working on it over on my end.
Good. We'll swap notes then as we move forward.
All right. I appreciate it, Josh. I appreciate you coming on and answering my questions.
Happy to